No one noticed the dragon's servant crying in the hangar, until the mechanic stopped the fleet for her. Lights hung from the ceiling, casting long shadows on the floor where ships waited like sleeping beasts. Most of the crew moved quickly, checking their gear, running to their stations, preparing for the fleet to launch. No one stopped to look at the corners of the hangar. No one noticed the small figure crouched behind a massive engine, a shadow among shadows. The figure was a dragon. Her scales were dark blue with hints of silver that shimmered in the light. Her wings were torn, one of them bent awkwardly at the tip. She did not look fierce or dangerous. She looked tired, and she was crying. Lyra wiped her eyes with her claws and forced herself to keep moving. She had duties to do. She had always had duties to do. She carried cargo that weighed more than a human could lift. She carried engines that were half her size. She polished floors that never seemed clean. She moved quietly, so quietly that most humans did not even notice her. They passed her without a word. She tried not to care. She told herself it was better this way. No one watching meant no one would complain about her mistakes. She placed a crate on a platform. It was heavy, and she grunted as she set it down. A rivet fell out of the crate and bounced on the metal floor. She bent down to pick it up. It rolled under another crate, and she had to stretch her claws far to reach it. Her wings scraped the floor, leaving tiny marks in the dust. A tear fell onto her scales. She blinked it away quickly, hoping no one had seen, but even if someone had, it would not matter. No one cared. The hangar doors opened. Sunlight flooded in, making the air hot and bright. Humans shouted to each other, calling names, checking lists, making sure nothing was missing. The engines of the ships roared quietly, waiting for the signal to explode into life. Lyra froze. She did not like the sunlight. It hurt her eyes. She lowered her head and kept working, sweeping debris into a pile that would never be seen. One human passed by. He was small, wiry, and moving fast. He carried a tablet and barked orders to a group of crew members. Lyra watched him with careful eyes. He did not look at her. He did not even notice her scales glinting in the sunlight. She let out a small sigh. It sounded like a whistle of air escaping from her lungs. She moved to another corner. There was a fuel tank that had spilled a little, a mistake that could be dangerous if not cleaned. She knelt beside it, using her claws to scrub the metal. The fuel burned her scales, and she flinched, but she kept working. She did not have a choice. She could not leave it. If she left it, someone would notice the spill and they would blame her. It was always her fault, no matter what happened. The pain in her wings was getting worse. One of the tears in the membrane was deep, and the muscles around it ached when she moved. She stretched carefully, trying not to worsen the injury. She knew she could not fly properly. She had not flown in months. But that did not matter. She was not supposed to fly. She was supposed to work. She was supposed to be silent. She was supposed to be invisible. The humans moved around her, stepping over cables, shouting to each other. They did not notice the wet streaks on the floor where she had cried. They did not notice the scratches on the metal where her wings had scraped. They did not notice the small pile of tools she had dropped or the rivets she had collected. She felt like a shadow of herself, a ghost in a world that ignored her. She tried to remember a time when someone had looked at her differently. She could not. No one had ever stopped to ask if she was hungry, if she was tired, if she was hurt. No one had ever said thank you. She remembered the first day she had arrived on this fleet. The humans had looked at her with curiosity, maybe fear. She had hoped for kindness. She had hoped for understanding. She had hoped for a friend, but the curiosity faded quickly. They saw her only as a tool, a strong, silent tool, a dragon servant. She finished cleaning the fuel spill and moved to another engine. It was massive, cold, and hard, and she could feel the vibrations through her claws as she worked. She adjusted some panels, tightened some bolts, and checked the alignment. Her body ached from the effort. She wanted to stop. She wanted to sit down and cry for a long time. But she did not, she could not. The fleet was counting on her. A loud horn sounded. It was a warning. The fleet would launch soon. The humans began moving faster, shouting over the engines and alarms. Lyra looked up at one of the ships. It was enormous, its hull shining under the hangar lights. She had helped repair it. She had polished it, cleaned it, adjusted its systems. She had made it ready. No one had thanked her. No one had noticed. She walked carefully, trying to keep her balance on the slippery floor. A loose panel moved under her claw, and she almost fell. She caught herself just in time. Her heart raced. She hated feeling weak. She hated feeling small. She hated feeling invisible. A human officer walked past, looking at a checklist. He noticed nothing. Not the scratches on the floor, not the wet streaks of tears, not the deep lines in her wings. He moved on, muttering to himself. She watched him go. She felt a small pang of anger. Why did they ignore her? Why did they pretend she was not there? Why did they not see that she was more than a machine, more than a worker, more than a tool? She reached the end of the hangar. There was a storage area filled with spare parts, crates, and fuel cells. She arranged everything carefully, making sure the labels were visible, making sure nothing was out of place. Her claws were sore. Her wings were screaming in pain, but she kept working. She had to, no one else would. A soft voice called her name. She froze. It was faint, almost lost among the shouts and alarms. She looked around. No one was there. She whispered her own name. The voice was gone. She shook her head. It was just her imagination. She was alone, as always. She settled near a small corner, leaning against a crate. Her wings drooped, her eyes heavy. She let a single tear fall, glinting in the sunlight. She did not cry loudly. She did not want anyone to notice. She had learned long ago that crying meant weakness. Crying meant being ignored. Crying meant being invisible. Time passed slowly. The humans continued their preparations. The horn sounded again, longer this time, signaling the final checks. She looked at the ships, at the engines, at the humans rushing everywhere. She felt small. She felt invisible. She felt forgotten. She felt pain that no one would see. And yet she continued. She moved from one task to another, cleaning, repairing, organizing, polishing. She worked in silence, hiding her tears, hiding her pain. She told herself that was all she could do. She told herself that being unnoticed was better than being blamed. She told herself that she did not matter. But even as she told herself these things, a small spark of hope remained. She did not know why. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was dangerous. But she hoped that one day someone would notice. Someone would see her not as a tool, not as a servant, but as a being with feelings, with pain, with heart. The hangar was quiet for a moment, only the hum of the engines and the soft footsteps of humans. Lyra closed her eyes, leaning against the crate. She whispered a small prayer, not knowing if anyone would hear. She whispered that she wanted to be seen. She whispered that she wanted someone to care. She whispered that she wanted to matter, and then the horn sounded again, louder, closer. The fleet was ready. The humans moved toward their ships. Lyra watched them, her heart heavy. She wanted to follow, she wanted to join, she wanted to be part of something bigger, but she knew her place. She was a servant, she was invisible, she was alone. She took a deep breath, wiped her tears, and moved back to her work. The engines needed checking, the floor needed cleaning, the fuel needed organizing. She did what she had always done. She worked. She moved quietly. She hid her pain. She waited, hoping that one day someone would notice the dragon servant crying in the hangar. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a small, fragile spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, that day was coming. Caleb wiped his hands on a greasy rag. The engine he was working on had been acting strange for days. Every human in the crew avoided it, calling it cursed or broken beyond repair. Caleb did not care. He liked engines. He liked the sound of metal and sparks, the smell of oil, and the satisfaction when everything worked perfectly. He had worked in hangars all his life, fixing ships, cleaning engines, and making sure humans could fly into space without trouble. As he tightened a bolt, he noticed something unusual. There was a small trail of blood near the engine panel. At first, he thought it was from some machine accident, maybe a cut on a metal edge. But when he looked closer, he saw the dark blue scales smeared in the liquid. He froze. The scales belonged to the dragon's servant, Lyra. He had seen her before, working quietly in the corners, but he had never spoken to her. No one did. She was invisible to most humans. He followed the trail, moving carefully around the massive engines and crates. It led him to a small corner behind a pile of spare parts. There she was, crouched against a crate, her wings drooping, her body trembling. She was crying quietly, wiping her eyes with her claws, trying not to make a sound. Caleb's heart tightened. He did not know why, but something about her small, trembling form made him stop. She looked so fragile, so alone. He knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to scare her. "Are you okay?" Lyra froze. She did not look at him. She did not answer. She had been ignored all her life. She had learned not to expect kindness from humans. She had learned to hide her pain. She did not know what to do when someone noticed. Caleb reached out a hand, careful not to touch her unless she wanted it. "You're hurt," he said gently. "Let me help you." She flinched at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She wanted to pull away, but her body was too weak. Her wings hurt too much, and she could not move easily. She pressed herself against the crate, trembling, waiting for him to go. Caleb looked at her wings. The tear in her membrane was deep, and the muscles around it were swollen and red. She had tried to keep working despite the injury. He felt a surge of anger. How could the fleet let her suffer like this? She was strong, yes, but she was not invincible. She was a living being, not a machine. "You can't keep doing this," Caleb said. His voice was firmer now. "This is bad. You need help." Lyra finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, her scales wet from tears. She looked at him, unsure. She had never trusted humans. She had never been offered help. She did not know if she could. Caleb stood slowly. He looked around the hangar. The fleet was preparing to launch. Humans shouted to each other, checking systems, loading cargo, moving toward their ships. No one noticed them. No one would stop. If she stayed here, she would be forced to keep working until her wings were useless. He made a decision. He moved toward the control panel that managed the hangar systems. He had worked here long enough to know how to stop the automated doors, silence alarms, and delay the fleet. He pressed the buttons quickly. The lights flickered. The hum of engines lowered. The hangar doors slowed. A loud alarm rang. "What the hell?" a human officer shouted. "What is going on? Why are the systems down?" Caleb did not answer. He moved back to Lyra. "I told you," he said. "You are not going to work yourself to death. I'm not letting it happen." She looked at him, confusion and fear in her eyes. She had never seen a human stand up for her before. She had never been protected. She had only been used. She did not know how to respond. The officer approached, frowning. "Mechanic, you are ordered to restart the systems immediately. The fleet must launch on schedule." "We cannot wait for a servant." Caleb shook his head. "I am not restarting anything," he said. "She is hurt. She needs medical attention. The fleet can wait." The officer's face turned red. "You are defying orders. Do you know what this means?" Caleb stood his ground. "I do. I also know that letting her suffer is worse than delaying a fleet. She is not a machine. She is alive. She feels pain. She matters." There was a pause. The crew and officers looked at the small dragon. They saw her wings, the scratches on her scales, the wet marks from her tears. For the first time, some of them felt a pang of guilt. They had ignored her. They had treated her like nothing. Lyra blinked at Caleb. She did not understand. Humans had always been loud and busy, focused on power and war. Why was this one different? Why did he care about her? She wanted to say something, but no words came. She only lowered her head, trembling. Caleb crouched beside her again. "Look at me," he said gently. "You don't have to hide. You don't have to be invisible. We are going to fix this. You are not alone." She lifted her eyes. They met his. Something shifted inside her, hope. A feeling she had almost forgotten. She did not speak, but she leaned slightly toward him. The officer stomped forward, anger in his eyes. "Mechanic, you will restart the fleet immediately or you will face serious consequences. This is not up for debate." Caleb shook his head again. "No," he said firmly. "We are not moving until she is safe. If that means the fleet waits, so be it. She is more important than any schedule." Other crew members whispered among themselves. Some looked ashamed. They had always ignored her. Some began to step closer, unsure but curious. They saw what Caleb saw, a small dragon, brave and loyal, crying while trying to serve. A medic finally arrived, rushing over at Caleb's call. They knelt beside Lyra, checking her wings, feeling for injuries, taking her temperature. She flinched at first, not used to gentle hands. Caleb watched carefully, making sure no one was rough with her. "She needs rest," the medic said. "She needs treatment immediately. If she had kept working another hour, it could have been permanent damage." Caleb nodded. "That's why I stopped the fleet. She matters. Don't let anyone forget it." The officer frowned, but the rest of the crew began to understand. They had seen too many small tragedies, ignored too many cries for help. Now they could not look away. They had to act. Lyra closed her eyes, trembling less now. She had never felt safe in a hangar before. She had never felt cared for. She had always been invisible. Now she was noticed. Now someone had stopped an entire fleet for her. Caleb stayed with her. He held a small cloth for her to wipe her tears, and he whispered gentle words, not expecting a response. She did not speak, but she leaned closer, trusting him. A bond was forming, one she had never known she could have with a human. Outside, the fleet waited. Ships hummed, engines roared, alarms sounded. Schedules would be missed. Officers would be angry. Orders would be broken. But inside the hangar in a small corner, a dragon servant cried no more. She was safe, she was seen, and for the first time she felt hope. Caleb looked around at the crew, at the human officers, and said firmly, "We all need to remember this. Strength is not the only thing that matters. Courage is not just in fighting enemies. Courage is standing up for those who cannot defend themselves. Lyra is one of us, and we will not let her suffer. The crew began to nod. Some whispered apologies. Some touched their foreheads in shame. They realized they had ignored someone brave, someone loyal, someone who mattered. And now, because of Caleb, the fleet would wait, and she would be treated with respect. Lyra blinked at Caleb, her wings still aching, her body still sore, but her heart lighter. She had never imagined a human would care so much. She had never imagined anyone would stop everything for her. She had never imagined that she could be more than invisible. The medic started treatment, carefully cleaning the torn wing, wrapping it, giving her medicine to ease the pain. Lyra flinched but did not move away. She trusted Caleb and the medic. She had learned that humans could be cruel, but now she was learning that humans could also be kind. Caleb stood by her side. He watched the hangar, the crew, the ships. He knew this delay would have consequences. Officers would be angry. Schedules would be ruined, but he did not care. He had made the right choice. He had saved someone who mattered, and in the end, that was more important than anything else. Lyra looked up at him, scales glinting in the hangar light, and gave a small nod. It was the first wordless thanks she had ever given a human. Caleb smiled. It was enough. It was everything. The fleet waited, engines humming, alarms ringing, and Lyra rested for the first time in months. She was safe. She was noticed. She was seen. And the galaxy had not yet realized how important that moment was. And Caleb knew one thing for sure. This small dragon had just changed everything. The hangar was noisy and tense. Alarms rang, engines hummed, and lights flickered as the fleet remained still. Ships that were supposed to launch had been delayed, and the officers were angry. They gathered in a cluster, talking loudly, pointing fingers, and shouting orders that could not be followed. Caleb stood near Lyra, watching the humans argue, his arms crossed. He did not move. He did not speak. He only waited. Lyra rested on a crate, her wings wrapped carefully around her body. The medic worked slowly, cleaning the tears in her membranes, wrapping them with soft bandages, and applying a healing ointment. Her claws trembled as they worked, and she flinched when the bandage touched a sore spot. Caleb rubbed her shoulder gently. "Easy," he said. "I'm here, you don't need to hide." One of the officers, a tall man with a sharp face named Carter, stomped toward Caleb. "Mechanic, this is outrageous. You have stopped a fleet for a servant. Do you know how serious this is?" Caleb looked up at him, calm but firm. "Yes, I know, and I also know that letting her work like that could have permanently hurt her. She is not a tool, she is alive." "She matters more than schedules or orders," Carter scowled. "You cannot make these decisions, you are not in command." Caleb shook his head. "I am not in command, but I can see when someone is being mistreated, and I will not let it continue." Other crew members whispered among themselves. Some were angry, some were confused, some felt guilty. They had ignored Lyra for months, watching her work long hours, cry alone, and push her body past its limits. They had never stopped to care. Now they could not ignore her. She was right there, fragile but alive, and Caleb had stood up for her. The medic spoke. "Her wings are badly torn. If she had worked any longer, she could have been crippled. She needs rest, medication, and careful handling. She cannot move yet." Carter's face twisted with frustration. "We cannot wait for that. The fleet has a mission. We have schedules, cargo, and deployments. One servant is not worth delaying everything." A younger officer named Miller looked uneasy. "Sir, maybe we have been unfair. She is more than a servant. She is brave. She has carried cargo, cleaned engines, repaired systems. She has done the work of dozens of crew members. Maybe we should listen to the mechanic." Carter snapped. "Don't question my orders. The fleet launches on schedule." Caleb stepped forward. "She is not just brave, she is alive. She has feelings. She has pain. Do you not see that?" Some crew members shifted uncomfortably. They remembered the scratches on the floors, the wet marks of her tears, the way she had silently carried heavy crates and cleaned fuel spills that could have killed her. They realized Caleb was right. They had treated her as a machine, not as a living being. Lyra blinked, looking at Caleb. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. He was protecting her. He was standing up to the humans who had ignored her. She had never felt so safe in a hangar before. Carter took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "This delay will cause problems. We cannot afford to wait for her recovery." Caleb did not back down. "You can afford to wait. We can fix engines, check cargo, and prepare for launch later. Nothing is more important than keeping someone from being hurt." Nothing is more important than doing the right thing. The younger officer Miller stepped closer to Lyra. I am sorry, he said softly. We should have noticed before, we should have helped. Lyra lowered her head, unsure what to do. Humans did not usually apologize. She had not heard an apology for years, maybe ever. She felt strange inside, a mix of hope, relief, and confusion. She did not speak. She only let them see her tears, her pain, and her trust in Caleb. The medic continued her work, carefully cleaning the deepest tears in her wings. She will need at least a few days of rest, the medic said. She cannot lift heavy crates, climb scaffolds, or fly until her wings are fully healed. Some officers shook their heads. Others nodded reluctantly. The crew began moving quietly, checking on her supplies, making sure she had food and water, and clearing a space for her to rest. It was small, but it was a start. For the first time, humans were paying attention to the dragon's servant. Caleb sat beside her crate, keeping her company. He held a small water container for her, and she drank slowly, hesitating at first. She had been ignored so long, she did not know if anyone would care. Caleb smiled gently. "It's okay," he said. "Take your time." "We are not going anywhere without you." Lyra blinked. She had never been offered patience before. She had never been treated like a living being. She had always been pushed, yelled at, ignored, or commanded. Now she felt a warmth inside that she had almost forgotten. It was a strange feeling, but it was welcome. The crew began to gather around. Some helped organize her resting area. Some brought clean blankets, food, and medicine. Others quietly apologized for ignoring her in the past. The hangar, which had been loud and tense moments ago, became quieter, softer, and warmer. Carter still looked angry, but even he could see the change. He could see how the crew had begun to notice, how the medic worked carefully, and how Caleb had stood up for what was right. He scowled but did not speak. He could not argue against the obvious. Lyra's value was more than her work. It was her courage, her loyalty, and her trust in humans who had never cared. Lyra slowly leaned against Caleb, letting herself relax for the first time in months. Her wings ached, but the pain felt less harsh with care. She blinked at the humans, uncertain but slowly understanding that they had begun to see her as more than a servant. Caleb whispered to her, "You are safe now. You don't need to hide anymore. We will take care of you." She nodded slightly, a small gesture but powerful. She had never had a choice before. She had never had someone defend her. Now she had Caleb and a few others who were beginning to understand. The hours passed slowly. The medic worked carefully, giving her medicine to ease the pain. The crew brought food and water. Caleb stayed close, making sure she did not move too much. The humans who had ignored her now watched quietly, learning that strength was not just in engines or weapons. Strength was in courage, in kindness, and in protecting those who could not protect themselves. Lyra closed her eyes, letting the warmth of care sink into her. She had been invisible for so long. She had been ignored, pushed, and left to cry alone. But now someone had stopped the fleet for her. Someone had stood up against authority for her. Someone had noticed her pain. She could not speak yet. She could not fly. Her body ached and her wings throbbed with every movement. But for the first time, she felt a sense of hope. She felt that maybe humans were not just powerful and loud, but also capable of care and justice. She felt that maybe she could belong, even as a dragon, among humans. Caleb watched the hangar, keeping an eye on officers, crew, and ships. He knew that delaying a fleet was serious. Orders would be questioned, schedules would be ruined, but he did not care. He had made the right choice. He had saved a life, and in the end, that mattered more than any schedule or deployment. The officer Carter finally spoke again, voice lower, trying to sound firm. "Mechanic, you have delayed the fleet, caused chaos, and disobeyed orders. What makes you think you are right?" Caleb looked at him calmly. "Because what is right is not always easy. What is right is not always popular. But it is never wrong to protect someone who cannot protect themselves. She is not a tool. She is not invisible. She is alive and she matters." Some crew members murmured agreement. Others looked thoughtful. Even Carter hesitated. For the first time, the human officers and crew were confronted with a truth they had ignored. Strength and courage were not only in weapons, engines, or schedules. They were in defending life. Lyra opened her eyes and looked at Caleb. She had never felt such a strange mix of relief, gratitude, and wonder. Humans could be frightening, loud, and careless, but now she was learning that they could also be brave, kind, and protective. She leaned against her crate and slowly relaxed. She let the medic finish her work, let the crew organize her corner, let Caleb sit with her. She had never felt so safe. She had never been seen. She had never been cared for like this. And in that hangar, amid engines, alarms, and delayed ships, a small dragon servant began to believe that humans could notice the quiet, protect the weak, and do what was right even when it was hard. Caleb whispered once more, "You will recover. We will take care of you. No one will hurt you again." Lyra blinked, letting the words sink in. She did not yet know how far the fleet would go or what the consequences would be for stopping it. She did not know how the humans would treat her in the days to come. But she knew one thing for sure. She had been noticed, she had been seen, and for the first time she felt hope. And the fleet waited, engines humming, alarms ringing, while a dragon who had been invisible began to heal, surrounded by humans who were learning that courage was not just in battles, but in standing up for those who could not defend themselves. The hangar was quieter now. The alarms still hummed, and engines waited, but the tension had shifted. Humans moved carefully around Lyra, making space for her to rest. She no longer crouched in the shadows. She lay on a pile of soft blankets, her wings slowly folding in a more comfortable position. Caleb sat nearby, keeping watch, while the medic adjusted her bandages and applied a cooling ointment. Lyra's body ached less than before. The initial swelling in her wings had gone down, and the tears in her membranes were beginning to close. She could feel strength returning, though slowly. She flexed her claws gently and tested a small stretch of her wings. It hurt, but the pain was different now. It was not sharp or crushing. It was a reminder of what she had survived. She let out a soft breath, her eyes closing. She had never felt this kind of relief before. Caleb watched her carefully. "Take it slow," he said softly. "You don't have to do anything yet, just rest." Lyra nodded slightly. She could not speak much yet. Words had been difficult before, but she wanted to show him that she trusted him. She had never trusted a human like this. She had never felt safe in a hangar filled with loud voices and moving ships. But now, beside Caleb, she felt a strange warmth, a connection she could not explain. Some of the crew approached, hesitant but curious. One young man named Liam brought a small bowl of water and placed it near her snout. "Here," he said quietly. "Drink slowly." Lyra sniffed the water and then lapped it gently. She had not eaten or drunk properly for hours, afraid that moving would bring more pain. The humans had noticed and taken care of her needs. She blinked at Liam, unsure how to respond. He smiled softly, then stepped back. The officer Carter remained at a distance, arms crossed, frowning. He had not approved of Caleb's actions, but even he could not deny the results. The fleet had not been launched, and Lyra was alive. She had survived what could have been permanent damage. He looked at the crew and saw their faces, some embarrassed, some relieved. He realized that the young dragon had changed the mood of the hangar. She had changed them. Caleb leaned closer to Lyra. "They are learning," he said. "They are starting to see you for who you are, not just what you can do." Lyra blinked at him. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning. Humans were beginning to notice. Humans were beginning to care. It was strange, unfamiliar, and wonderful. The medic spoke again. "We will need to monitor her closely for the next few days. She cannot lift heavy objects or fly yet. Her muscles need rest and her wings need careful treatment." Caleb nodded. "Then we make space for that. We adjust schedules, we move cargo in smaller loads. Nothing is more important than helping her heal." Some crew members whispered to each other. "We have been wrong," one said. "We treated her like she was nothing." Another nodded. "She has done more work than half the humans here. She deserves care, not punishment." Lyra listened quietly, not used to praise. She had worked silently for months, unseen and unappreciated. Hearing humans speak kindly, even in whispers, was almost too much to understand. She lowered her head, blinking, her heart beating faster. She wanted to speak, but the words did not come. She only let herself feel the warmth spreading inside. Caleb gently placed a hand on her wing, careful not to touch the sore areas. "You are brave," he said. "You have always been brave, and now we see that." She shivered at the touch, not from fear but from emotion. She had never been told she was brave. She had never been seen. She had never been noticed. Now, beside Caleb, she felt a sense of belonging that she had never known. Hours passed slowly. The humans continued their work, preparing the fleet while making sure Lyra was safe. Some brought blankets, others brought food, and a few quietly apologized for ignoring her in the past. The hangar had changed. It was no longer a place of noise and orders. It had become a place of care and attention. Caleb watched her carefully. "Soon you will be able to help again," he said. But on your terms, not because anyone forces you, not because anyone ignores your pain, you will choose. Lyra tilted her head. The idea of choice was new. She had always been told what to do, where to go, how to act. Now she could make decisions. She could take control of her own life. The thought was both frightening and exciting. Some crew members began asking questions. "Can she help with engines?" one whispered. "She is strong enough to lift heavy parts." Another said, "Maybe she can help repair ships faster than we can." Caleb nodded. "Yes, she can help, but only when she is ready, only when she wants to. Strength alone is not enough. Respect is just as important." The medic nodded. "We will support her recovery. She is strong, yes, but also fragile. If we respect her limits, she will thrive. If we ignore them, she will be hurt again." Lyra listened to their words. She could feel the humans' intentions were genuine. They were learning. They were changing. She felt a small hope growing inside her. She could help them. She could work with them. But she would be seen. She would be heard. She would matter. Days passed. Lyra's wings grew stronger. She could stretch them fully without pain. She could climb small scaffolds and lift light objects. She still rested often, and Caleb stayed close, encouraging her progress but never pushing too hard. She learned to trust him completely. She followed his guidance, and slowly the humans began to rely on her in new ways. One morning, a group of crew members needed to lift a heavy engine. Caleb gestured to Lyra. She hesitated, testing her wings, then nodded. Together, she and two humans lifted the engine with ease. The crew watched in awe. They had never realized how capable she was when treated with respect and care. Carter, still frowning, approached and watched silently. He could not deny the results. The fleet was not delayed. The work was faster, safer, and more efficient. Caleb smiled. "See," he said quietly. "Respect and care do not slow us down, they make us stronger." Lyra lowered the engine carefully, placing it exactly where it needed to go. She had done this countless times before, but now she felt the difference. She was not invisible. She was not forced. She was recognized. She was trusted. She was appreciated. The crew began to see her differently. They spoke kindly, shared small smiles, and included her in discussions. They asked her opinion on how to organize cargo or repair engines. Lyra listened carefully, giving simple suggestions, her voice soft but clear. She had never spoken to humans like this before. They listened. They responded. They valued her input. Caleb watched proudly. "This is what I wanted," he said. "We see her, we respect her. We work together, nothing else matters more." Lyra's confidence grew. She could move freely now. She could lift, climb, and stretch. She still felt the memory of pain, but it no longer held her back. She understood her strength and her limits. She understood that humans could be cruel, but they could also learn, change, and protect. As the fleet prepared for a new launch, Lyra stood beside Caleb. She looked at the ships, the engines, and the humans working around her. She did not feel small. She did not feel invisible. She felt part of something bigger, something that recognized her, that respected her, and that allowed her to matter. Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded. It was not just about lifting engines or cleaning floors. It was about being seen, being valued, being part of a team that cared. She was ready. The humans around them worked efficiently, more aware now of those who were quiet, strong, and often unnoticed. They had learned that caring for each other, even for someone who had been invisible, made the fleet stronger. Lyra looked at Caleb, and for the first time she felt a sense of belonging. She had survived pain, invisibility, and neglect. Now she was recognized. She was trusted. She was part of the team, and she would never forget it. As the sun set over the hangar, casting long shadows on the engines and crates, Lyra stretched her wings fully. They glimmered in the light, strong and ready. She had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. She was no longer a hidden servant. She was seen. She was valued. She was alive. And the fleet, which had once ignored her tears, now waited not just for schedules or engines, but for the dragon who had proven that courage, strength, and loyalty were more than physical power. They were the heart of the crew, the spirit that made humans and dragons work together as one. Lyra looked around, feeling the warmth of care, the strength of respect, and the hope that had been given to her. She knew challenges would come, but now she also knew she had allies, friends, and humans who would stand with her. And in that hangar, surrounded by machines, humans, and the soft light of evening, a dragon who had once been invisible stretched her wings and prepared to take her place among those who saw her worth. The hangar was alive with movement. Humans and machines worked together, preparing for launch. The engines hummed, cargo was loaded, and final checks were made. But this time, the atmosphere was different. The crew moved with a quiet respect for each other, aware of the value of every life, human or dragon. Lyra stood near Caleb, stretching her wings fully. They were strong now, healed and ready. She had learned to trust humans, and they had learned to trust her. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. She did not hide in corners. She did not work silently while others ignored her. She was part of the team, and they had recognized her courage and strength. Caleb looked at her and smiled. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lyra nodded. She had tested her wings, lifted heavy objects, and contributed to repairs. She was ready to take her place not as a servant but as a valued member of the fleet. She felt proud, strong, and confident for the first time in her life. The officers came over to check on her. Carter, still frowning, stopped in front of Lyra. He had not fully approved of Caleb's decision before, but he had to admit the results were undeniable. She was capable, efficient, and brave. He studied her, and for the first time he seemed to see her as more than a tool. "Dragon," he said, his voice cautious. "You have recovered well. You are ready to assist in the launch." Lyra tilted her head. It was strange to hear respect in a human's voice. She had never known it before. She bowed her head slightly, acknowledging the words. It felt good, almost strange, but right. Caleb stepped forward. "She will assist, yes, but she is more than that. She is part of the team. Treat her with respect and she will help us all. Ignore her and we risk losing more than just time or resources." The crew nodded. They had learned their lesson. They had seen the dragon cry, seen her injured, and seen the courage it took to work quietly while no one noticed. Now they would not forget. Lyra moved through the hangar, her wings folding neatly against her body. She checked the engines with Caleb, lifting panels humans could not reach, guiding small repairs and helping to organize cargo. She was efficient, precise, and careful. Every movement showed her strength and intelligence. The crew watched in awe. They had never realized what a valuable ally she could be when treated with respect and care. As the sun rose over the hangar, casting golden light on the metal floors and engines, the human officers called for final checks. The fleet was ready. The ships were lined up, engines humming, lights blinking, and alarms quiet. It was time to launch. Lyra stood beside Caleb on a raised platform looking over the fleet. She had been invisible once, ignored, and treated as a tool. Now she was visible, respected, and trusted. She felt a deep pride, a mix of strength and relief. She had survived pain, loneliness, and neglect, and she had earned her place. Caleb placed a hand on her shoulder. "Today we launch not just ships, but trust, respect, and teamwork," he said softly. "You have shown everyone here what courage really is. Thank you for being you." Lyra blinked at him. She had never been thanked in this way. She had never been seen or appreciated. She wanted to speak, but no words came. She nodded instead. Her heart was full, and that was enough. The officers gave the final order. Launch sequence initiated. Engines roared to life, and the ships vibrated with power. Humans moved with precision, checking systems and guiding their teams. Lyra flapped her wings, feeling the air currents in the hangar, testing her strength. She was ready. She would fly when needed, assist when required, and stand beside humans as an equal. As the ships lifted, the hangar doors opened, and sunlight flooded in. Lyra stretched her wings fully, feeling the warmth and strength coursing through her. She had grown from a hidden servant into a valued ally, respected and trusted by those who had once ignored her. Caleb stood near her, watching the fleet rise into the sky. He smiled proudly. The humans had learned a lesson too. They had learned that strength alone was not enough, that courage included protecting the weak, noticing the quiet, and doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Some crew members looked at Lyra with admiration. "She is amazing," one whispered. "We were wrong to ignore her." Another nodded. "She is part of this team, and we are lucky to have her." Lyra watched the ship soar into space, feeling a sense of belonging she had never imagined. She had been invisible, cried alone, and worked tirelessly while humans ignored her. Now she was seen, respected, and valued. She could trust humans, and they could trust her. It was a bond forged through courage, kindness, and recognition. The fleet cleared the hangar and moved toward open space. Lyra followed, gliding gracefully beside Caleb and a few human crew members. She could feel the thrill of movement, the freedom of her wings, and the joy of being recognized. She had survived her pain, and now she could soar with pride. Officers watched her with a new respect. She was not just a servant or a tool. She was a partner, a brave and loyal member of the fleet. They understood that ignoring strength and courage in any form, even in those who seemed small or quiet, was a mistake they would not repeat. Caleb looked at Lyra. "You did this," he said. "You taught us something important, not just humans, but everyone here." Lyra tilted her head. She had never been a teacher before. She had only been invisible. Now she understood that her strength, loyalty, and courage could inspire others. She had earned her place not just as a helper, but as a symbol of what it meant to care, to notice, and to respect. The fleet moved into orbit, ships aligned and ready for missions ahead. Lyra stayed close to Caleb, flapping her wings gently, ready to assist wherever needed. The crew had learned their lesson. They had seen courage, strength, and loyalty in a small dragon who had cried in the hangar, unseen and unappreciated. Now they could not ignore her. The sun set on the hangar, casting long shadows and warm light over the ships. Lyra perched on a platform, watching the fleet rise. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer ignored. She was strong, brave, and respected. She had friends and allies. She had humans who would protect her, care for her, and recognize her worth. Caleb stood beside her, quiet and proud. He had stopped the fleet for her, defended her, and helped her be seen. The lesson was clear. Courage and strength were not only in battle, engines, or schedules. They were in protecting the weak, noticing the quiet, and doing what was right even when it was hard. Lyra stretched her wings one last time, feeling the wind and light on her scales. She had survived pain, loneliness, and neglect. She had been invisible. Now she was seen. She was trusted. She was valued. She was part of the team. She was part of the fleet. She was alive. And as the ships launched, soaring toward new missions and challenges, Lyra flapped her wings proudly beside humans who had finally learned what it meant to notice, to protect, and to respect. She had cried in the hangar, and now she flew with courage, honor, and recognition. The fleet moved forward, stronger and more united than ever, carrying not just engines, cargo, and weapons, but courage, trust, and the lesson that no one, no matter how small or quiet, should ever be ignored. Lyra had changed everything, and the humans had learned that the heart of courage often beats in those who are overlooked, unseen, and underestimated. They had learned that true strength is in noticing, caring, and standing together. And in the quiet after the engines roared, Lyra perched high, wings outstretched, heart full, and eyes bright. She had once been invisible. Now she was remembered, respected, and celebrated. She had soared from shadows into light, and nothing would ever make her feel unseen again. The fleet continued its journey, carrying humans and dragon alike, ready for battles, challenges, and discoveries. And Lyra, the dragon who had once cried in a hangar alone, now flew with pride, courage, and the knowledge that she mattered.